this. Anyone been there? It probably doesn't look like that anymore, but this is Macy's in New York. It's an old building that was created in 1903, and ever since then, Macy's has become the department store that everyone wants to go to. And the story goes like this. There was a couple who lived in the back hills of beyond, man and wife, and they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. And let's face it, let's be frank, they were hillbillies, all right? They didn't know anything about technology, and they won a prize. And the prize was to go and take a trip to the Big Apple. So they got into their best clothes, and they got on the Greyhound bus, and it took them all the way up to New York and dropped them off in Times Square. And they got out, and they were looking up with their mouths open at all these skyscrapers. They'd never seen anything like it before. Doha has nothing on New York. Or maybe it's the other way around, I don't know. But generally speaking, they were amazed. And the wife said, come on, let's go off to Macy's. And he said, what's Macy's? She said, it's a department store. Let's go off there and have a look. And he said, what's a department store? She said, you'll find out when you get there. It's lots of shops. And he's like, typical, right, okay. They walked off and they found Macy's, and they walked into this great big open space, this atrium, and there were staircases going off in all directions, hundreds of people milling around, more people than they'd seen in their lives before, and they were just amazed at the place. And the woman said to her daughter, come on, dear, let's go off and see the women's fashions. And they left the poor guy standing there on his own with his son, and they were just standing there watching. And in the corner, he noticed that a line was forming, a queue. And he watched this queue for this line for a while. And he noticed that there was a door that rolled back in the wall. And these people went in, and the door shut. And then a little dial on the top went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2. And the doors opened again, and the people had changed. And it baffled him, and he looked at this, and it happened several times. People were changing. What kind of a machine was this that changed people? And then he noticed a little old woman walking in, like this. You know what's coming next. Don't preempt me, all right? And this little old woman walked in. And I do a good impression of an old man, don't I, actually, which is what I am. But anyway, walking in, the doors closed, and the dial went up, 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 and down, down, down. Doors opened again. And out walked a long, tall, blonde, beautiful woman. And he stared at her, and he said to his son, son, go and get your mother. The tale here is that technology sometimes baffles us, sometimes frightens us, sometimes scares us, sometimes makes us uncomfortable, sometimes disrupts who we are and what we are. And Arthur C. Clarke, a science fiction writer, said something very profound about this. He said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's really, I think, important for us to remember at this time, because some of these technologies that are coming on the horizon, which I'm going to talk about, some of these things that we're going to see happening in the next few years are going to shock us a bit. Some of us are going to get uncomfortable with it. Some of us are going to be baffled by it and think, how am I going to use this in teaching and education? And some of us are just going to stand back amazed and think, I want one. Yeah? But the thing about the future, and the future is where I kind of work. I only come home at weekends, you know. The future is what I'm looking at all the time. And I'm going to show you what some of the trends are. But before we do that, there's a problem. Can we actually predict the future? Well, I was in Las Vegas last week, and there are loads of people there that couldn't predict the future. They lost loads of money. I watched them. I thought, I'm not playing that game. It's a mugs game. But there were people there who were trying to predict things, and you know, on the roulette tables and so on, and they were losing loads of money. I thought, these people can't predict anything. We can't even predict what the economy is going to do tomorrow, can we, really, let alone predict what the future is. But let's have a look of the problem. The problem is that we can probably predict part of the future, but we can't predict all of it. We can see a narrow tunnel of expectations, but we can't see the full breadth. As the US mayor in 1880 found out when he said about the new telephone system that he'd just seen developed, one day every town in America will have a telephone. He was right. I've been to America. Every town in America has a telephone. Have you noticed? Every town in America has a telephone. What he couldn't foresee was this kind of stuff. Do you know what that is? This is in a shopping centre in London. They're all over the world now. He couldn't foresee that one day everybody would have one of these babies in their pocket. He couldn't foresee the breadth of it. He could just see the depth of it, or the extent of it. These are you open them up, it's free charging, you put your phone in, you plug it in, you walk away with the key, come back 3 hours later, and it's charged up for you. You're going to see these increasingly everywhere, because this is one of the big problems with mobile phones, lack of battery power, and you're caught out in the middle of somewhere and you can't charge it. These things are going to be cropping up everywhere. This is one of our futures, if you like. Michio Kaku, who's an American-based physicist, said, it's impossible to predict the future with great accuracy. And then he has a whole book predicting the future up to about 50 years from now. And you think, yeah, okay, right. But he does actually talk to all the people who are actually creating these technologies. And he talks to all the trendsetters. And then he comes together with a synthesis of all these ideas, which I think is a fabulous idea. And he tries to present what the possible futures might be. Notice we're using the word in plural here, because there are many possible futures that we have to comprehend and we have to contemplate. But where have we come from, I think, is the first question that we've got to ask if we're going to start looking at the future. Where have we come from? Let's look at some things that people said. This is from Villemar, who was a French artist around about 1910. He said, this is what work's going to look like at the turn of the century. And he's talking about Doha, isn't he? Building. But he's talking about building with machines, which was unheard of in them days. Guy there pressing a button, and the robot does the work for him. Is that familiar? I think that's fairly accurate. But this probably happened around about 1930. So it wasn't that far ahead. I think this is a bit more fanciful, you know, personal flying machines. Anyone got one? No, you see, it didn't happen, did it? But it was his idea of leisure in the year 2000. Here's another one. Tanks. That's an interesting one, because I think tanks were probably on the drawing table then. The First World War was only about 4 or 5 years away, and he probably saw some advanced warning about this and formulated this idea that one day we'd be in armoured vehicles firing at each other. What about this one? Policing. That's probably quite an interesting one, although I know that Da Vinci thought about helicopters many, many centuries before. This, for me, I think is quite an interesting one, because I get these guys flying over my house just about every night when I'm back in the UK. I guess they're checking up on me. But there you are, policing. What about this one? Communication. That looks very like video conferencing to me, like interactive television, doesn't it? So he's got some prescient ideas here. And here's one that you're going to love. You like that? This was their concept of learning or education, yeah? In about 1910. It's all about instruction. It's all about getting the knowledge from the professor into the student, probably without having to pass through two minds in the process. I'd love to know what this guy here is doing. This guy, can I get the laser working here? The guy there with the, you know, he must be the dunce of the class, I think. You know, he's probably done something wrong, and he's been excluded from the learning process. He has to work. But that's interesting, isn't it? So you've got all of this kind of stuff going on. What we're looking at really is disruptive technologies. What we're looking at for the future of learning is the fact that these technologies are going to disrupt forever what we're going to be doing. So you've heard about MOOCs this morning, you've heard about flipped classrooms this morning, you've heard about various other approaches this morning. They are disruptive in the extent that they will change forever the way we conceive and perceive of education and learning. And they're even starting to reshape the way we conceive of knowledge as well. What is knowledge? Well, it can be a number of things now. So disruptive technology is where we're at. And William Gibson, Canadian science fiction writer, said this: the future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. And what he means by that is that there are people who have the technology and people who don't. But wait a minute, there are also people that can use the technology when they've got it and people who can't. And there are also people that will use the technology and those that won't. So not only have we got socioeconomic divides, we've also got psychological divides and skills divides. And so you have to consider that not everybody will buy into this. Okay? Where are we right now? Well, this is what's happening. Can you see what this is? Shout it out. No, because they're all in shirt sleeves. Yeah, okay. It's Obama, definitely, but where is this?
A rally.
It's a rally somewhere.
Arizona.
It's in Germany. Well done. Go to the top of the class. Who said that? Yeah, you got a badge. Okay. Rather than a certificate. I got it in. But the
Not only you, but every tweeter this side of this.
Yeah. I love hecklers, don't you? Well, right, you don't. Neither do I, really. I'm just buttering him up. But anyway, look at what's happening in the background. You see what's happening here? This is history being made. This was before he was made president of the United States, the first black president of the US, about to become the next president. And this is history being made. These people in the background, they're all doing something. They're all raising something up, and they're taking pictures. There's even a guy over there, look, with a laptop. He's live streaming. I think this is an incredible picture. These people are all connected. This is the society we live in now. We live in a society of ubiquitous connection. If you can't get Wi-Fi, you wonder why. You ask why, you complain, because you expect it now. Our expectations are changing because of the technology we have in our pocket, which that US mayor could not foresee. What would happen if you stopped the internet for a minute? What would you miss? This is what you'd miss. Shall I read some of them out to you? 1.3 million video views. Actually, 70 hours of video uploaded on YouTube every minute. 70 hours. Most of it's rubbish. But some of it, you might find, is very useful for your class. So you have to filter it out. That's one of the new roles of the teacher, is to filter out content. What else is happening? 6 new Wikipedia articles published every minute. You surprised? Something like 100 new LinkedIn accounts and 1,300 new mobile accounts every minute are being made somewhere in the world. One fact that you will not see up here is that only one paper-based article is being published every minute somewhere in the world. Now that should indicate to you the trends of where we're going. I don't think we're going to see a paperless classroom. I think paper will always be with us, but it will have special functions. It's no longer going to be the only medium through which we communicate. We know that. It's happening now. We're going to have to become transliterate, all of us. We're going to have to be able to interpret data and produce data and share data and create data that is on many platforms. And I think this is one of our futures. So the growth is not just linear. Ray Kurzweil says growth is now exponential. Change is exponential because of technology driving it. So we have to consider that. And here's just another statistic for another infographic, which I find staggering. 8 new internet users every second somewhere on the planet. And it's growing up and up. And America alone, internet users as of March, last month, 78.1% of the population of the US is now an internet user. We've got to pay attention to these statistics, and we've got to start shaping and modeling our new education provision according to the expectations of the mass of the population, not forgetting that it's unevenly distributed, of course. Here's just some of the reasons why all this content's out there. I won't labor the points on this, but 1 billion Facebook users plus, and over 100 billion connections. That's like the human brain when you think about it, isn't it? So just think about Kurzweil's idea of the singularity that we're heading towards, possibly, as one of our futures, where man becomes a part of the whole kind of process of world connections, and where the computer actually becomes the major tool with which we connect with, and becomes the processing, we become part of that processing power, if you like. It's a scary thought. Cyborgs. We learn by doing, as we've seen from Derek's work this morning. And all of these tools are there to give us that ability to create and consume and repurpose and remix content. So this is going to be one of our futures. This is something that Eugene Barsky calls the architecture of participation. This is what we are already involved in. Who actually uses a social media tool of some kind? Put your hand up if you use a social media tool. So that's around about half, maybe almost a half of the population of this room. Depends on where you go. In some countries, it's 100%. Some countries, it's less. So again, it's unevenly distributed. But I predict that more and more people are going to be using this idea of getting into Learning 2.0. Children. Average digital birth of a child is 6 months. That's when they first start to appear on the internet somewhere. Sometimes it's even before that. It's incredible. They consume content, they produce content, they remix it, and they share it. And learning is changing as a result of that. These are the young people who are in a few years' time will be coming into your institutes. They are expecting a different thing to happen to the past generations. They're expecting maybe something different to maybe what you're going to offer them, and I think that's going to be challenging to all of us. Alec Kura said, a Canadian academic, maybe you've heard of him, he said, if you think the web is mainly as a place for looking up things, you're sadly wrong. It does a lot more than just becoming a repository for content. This is why content is no longer king. Sorry, Bill Gates. Content may have been king 10 years ago. Now context is king. It's not what you do with it so much as where you find it, where you position it, and how you use it. Now, here we go. This is the interesting bit. Where are we heading next? Having looked at the past and the present, this is imaginary, but let's have a look. Some future learning tools for you to think of. Once, back in the 1990s, who was around then in education? How many of you were actually working in education around the 1990s? Not many of you. We thought then that the future was multimedia, didn't we? Everything was about computer-assisted learning. Everything then was about, putting video and audio together and so on. But then, around about the year 2000, I think it was 1999 actually, I was in Berlin and they said to me on a panel in a big conference, what do you think the future is? I said, I think the future is going to be the web. I think the future is going to be the internet. Everything is going to converge on the web. I stuck my neck out, but I could see the trends. And that's exactly what we've seen happening. And 10 years on, I said I thought the future was smart mobile. But now I'm going to tell you one more thing. I think now we have a future that's going to be very personalized. And I'll show you why in a moment. This is the Horizon Report, New Media Consortium. Who's heard of that? Anyone heard of the Horizon Report? If I was you and you're interested in looking at the future, look at the Horizon Report. Look it up. New Media Consortium, Horizon Report. It comes out every year. It comes out in lots of formats. It's now even regional because certain countries are having their own versions. So it comes out as a compulsory education sector, and it comes out as a higher education sector version. And what they do is they get a whole group of leading experts together, and they ask them to decide what they think will be the top 2 tools or trends that will happen widely adopted in technology in education over the next year, 2 to 3 years, and 4 to 5 years. And this is what they said about 2013. Oh, what a surprise. MOOCs will be adopted in 1 year or less. In fact, as you can see, they're already being adopted massively around the world from Phil's presentation this morning. What else did they say? Tablet computing. That's not a surprise. We can very easily predict 1 year down the road. Here's now where it starts to get more dodgy, as we say in England. All right? Difficult. Games and gamification. Is that a surprise to you? Learner analytics, the big data. Data mining of student activities. 4 to 5 years, this is where it starts to become very, very difficult now. 3D printing. Wearable technology, all exotic stuff going on now. This is 5 years down the road, they say. I think in some ways they may be being conservative. Maybe it's sooner than that, but we'll see. And I'm gonna throw one into the mix as well, which I think is going to be interesting for you to think about. Tangible computing. We'll come to that in a moment, and I'll give you some examples of what I think we'll see. And here I'm really starting to, polish up the crystal ball because I really don't know. This is just speculation, but we'll see. Here's the first mobile phone. Well, it's 2 his and hers. You need conversation, don't you? No, actually, the first mobile phone was this one here. This is Malcolm Cooper, who designed the first ever mobile phone. It was 40 years old last week. Happy birthday, mobile phone, cell phone. And it was all battery, mainly. Most of it was battery, and it probably lasted about half an hour before you had to recharge it. Battery technology in them days was quite difficult. Now it's a lot more efficient, unless you've got an iPhone, of course. And Martin Cooper really admitted that he designed his phone on the Star Trek series, which came out in the late 60s, early 70s, didn't it? And so science fiction starts to promote science fact, and technology starts to emerge from fiction. because these guys actually are writing about stuff that they can foresee. And then it happens because it's out there in the public domain. That's an interesting concept, that. I would say this, that multimedia brought the world into the classroom. Now we're seeing a switch, the flip, if you like, where smart cell phones are actually taking the classroom back out into the world again. And we're going to see a lot more mobile personal learning happening. And if you want to talk about tangible computing, we have to start talking about the Internet of Things. Is that someone's phone going, I'll get it. I'll answer that for you. The idea about the Internet of Things, where you can connect anything to anything else using the Internet, and you can connect people to it. And we already know that by 2008, the number of things that are connected to the Internet is now greater than the number of people on Earth. So we're looking at more than 7 billion. And by 2020, we're looking maybe conservatively at 50 billion objects being connected to the web. And I'm talking about anything here. So if you look at the way that we conceive of the web now, if you look at Web 1, as Tim O'Reilly would have called it, these are kind of, again, false kind of distinctions. But let's think about the first type of web that came out back in the 90s when it became aware, we all became aware of it, and when Tim Berners-Lee started the idea of the World Wide Web off, and we started to be able to interface with it and navigate it easily. Web 1 was all about hyperlinking, hypermedia. It was about connecting something to something else. Web 2, if we can call social media that, is about user participation. It's about connecting with people as well as with content. Web 3, if there's going to be a thing, is more about reconnecting content in a smarter way. And if you want to look at a topographical map of this is a map that I've created based on the work of Nova Spivak, which is, I've adapted it quite severely, but that's the trajectory we need to go in if you look at these axes. We're looking at better internet connectivity, better information, better social connectivity in two directions. We need to go up in terms of both of them. And Web 1 really sits down there. It's quite low in both. You can get this concept. Web 2 is much more socially rich, but it's not more information rich, not that much. Semantic web, the way of connecting things more smartly, that's much more information rich, but it's socially bereft. And so therefore we need to start thinking about going in this direction, or the web of webs, if you like, or what I'm calling Web X.0. In fact, I call it the smart extended web. And to summarize, before we move on, Web 1 connects information, Web 2 connects people, Web 3 connects knowledge, and Web 4 connects intelligence. And I pause while you take your pictures. Okay, right. This will be available if you like. And I'll show you an example of the extended web. It's already existing, but it's kind of small at the moment. So we're talking about intelligent filtering and recommender systems. We're talking about the fact that when you go onto the Amazon site and you buy a book, it says to you, oh, did you know that 27 people who bought this book also bought that book? And you go, ooh, I didn't know that book existed. I want it. Great marketing, but think how we could apply that in education. Think how we can create pathways, desire paths, if you like. This snail here expends a lot of energy. It lays down a slimy enzyme trail as it goes to find food. Then it drifts back along the same trail because it's easier. It expends less energy. The second snail goes along the same trail, expends even less energy. The third snail, and so on. Do you see the point? We create the pathways. As Mike Wesch says, we teach the machine. We start to create these pathways. Learning 3.0, if there's going to be such a thing, I think has these 4 components to it. I won't label them, but I'll give you a topographical map of them. And this is what I think is happening. The cloud is going to be our infrastructure. It's going to become increasingly important to us that we're going to be saving our content outside of our institution. And there are ethical and legal and safety issues there, of course, security issues. The 3D visualization and interaction, the touch and non-touch technologies, that's going to be our interface. The tools are going to be smart mobile technologies mainly, because we are going to be much more distributed in our activities. And fourthly, we've got the interaction, which is going to be much more collaborative and intelligent in terms of the way we filter content and use it. So that's my topographical map. And I don't expect you to read all this, but I just want to point out a couple of things here. If you go from 1, 2 to 3, you're starting to look at different things. You're starting to look at going from content organization, which is hierarchical and top-down. You're starting to go through the heterarchy, which is, I suppose, bottom-up, the people's choice, the folksonomy, as we call it, into networked and multi-directional, which I'm calling rhizonomy. the rhizome, the root structures, which go in every direction. There is no particular order or sequence to it. It's chaotic, but it tends to make sense. This is where we're heading, I think. And I'll leave you to read the rest on the slides later on because we'll run out of time. The future is going to be touch or non-touch, or maybe both. We see this happening. Google Glass is coming out later this year. There are already other imitations available as well. And it's going to retail at about $1,500, we think. It's going to do all of this for us, for those of us who buy into it as the early adopters. But we've got to ask questions, how do we actually apply this to education, to pedagogy? You've probably seen this, MIT's Sixth Sense Wearable AI. This is Patty Mace and Pranav Mistri's wonderful invention where you can actually wear a projector and project onto any surface and project content onto it and manipulate it using the finger caps. This is the first inkling of mixed reality. It's where the web meets the world. It's going to be gestural, I think, in terms of what it does. I would predict, actually, that, and this is me sticking my neck out again, I would predict that tablet computing is a transitionary phase between keyboard control and gestural and voice control. I think we're going to see 5 to 10 years of it, and that'll be it. And then we'll be totally gestural based. We shall see. Bring me back in 5 years and see if I'm right. There we are. So this is all possible because of the Xbox 360 Connect, the depth camera and the infrared camera, and the way it's interpreted and rendered onto the screen. There are lots of versions of this. You can see some pedagogical uses here already emerging, where you add content by projecting it or visualizing it onto existing content. So it enriches the content, if you like. And I won't actually play this video for you now because we'll run out of time, but this is where you can use technology such as capacitance sweep technology. It varies depending on how many fingers you use to touch an object. So it will sense whether you're gripping a doorknob, whether you're just touching it with one finger, whether you're turning it with 2 fingers, and so on. And it will respond accordingly. And apparently, according to this tool, the Touche tool, you can actually connect anything to the internet now, and it will respond to various multi-touches. But that's going away from the non-touch technology. So there are 2 possible futures here. That's just the way we interpret some of the issues of embeddedness and mobility with these types of Internet of Things tools. There's the Internet of Things, if you like, on the right-hand side. But let's consider how we apply this just in everyday life. Here's me taking a picture of a shopping mall from above. You can imagine these people here, they want to order food. Well, the table becomes your food order. You touch the table, it brings you the menu. You choose from the menu, and then you pay by credit card, and the food comes to you. This woman carrying the buggy here, she wants the best route through the mall, so it will show her where the ramp access is. These people here, walking along, maybe the shop owners want to know what the footfall is behind in front of their shop. They want to know how to attract more customers, perhaps. So the analytics from that will be sent to them. And finally, this person running here, late for a meeting, she can actually speak into Siri and say, "I'm going to be late for the meeting," and it will send a message to the people that are waiting for her. Even better than that, she can say, "Siri, mow my lawn," and the mowing machine will actually mow her lawn while she's out. Imagine that. And then imagine how we could apply that in the future to learning. What can we do with objects that are intelligent? Learner analytics. I'm not going to, bust a gut with this one because this is something I think you're all aware of. If you're not, read up on it because big data, I think, is going to be huge in the way we manage courses in the future. The use of intelligent data, user data from learners themselves, I think is going to be quite important in the future. And mobile learning I've already talked about. We just need to consider that there are lots of ways of using mobile learning. And they're going to increase. I mean, there's some mobile learning here going on. There's 5 generations here of mobile devices. And over here on the right-hand side is the earliest version of the mobile device, the book. We are distributed beings now, says Mark Curtis. And we need to consider that. So what does it all mean for us? Winston Churchill at Harvard University in 1942 said, "The empires of the future will be empires of the mind." We are dealing with the mind, folks. We're not dealing with technology. We are dealing with learning. We are dealing with people's minds here. We've got to get it right. And one of the things I will say to you is that flipping the classroom is just the start. in my organization, we're already flipping roles. So therefore, I don't teach anymore. Shock horror, a professor who doesn't teach. What I do is I give my students challenges, problems, conundra to solve. And they go off and they do the research themselves and come back and then they teach me. Then I challenge them. We flipped the roles as well as the classroom. And I'd urge you to consider that idea as well, because we've got the technology to be able to do this now. And we learn by teaching, I've discovered. If they're going to come and present in front of me in the class, they've really, really got to know what they're talking about. And I don't know what that is. But let's have a look and see if we can get rid of it. Turn my security on? Do we have security guards here I can turn on? You know? Let's have a look. Shall I get rid of this? Maybe I should just go up here and just click that like so. And it'll destroy another computer somewhere in the building. But we do learn by teaching. And another thing that Marshall McLuhan said this, we shape our tools and then afterwards our tools shape us. We have all of these aspects now available to us. There's personal learning, there's social learning, there's global learning. We can become global educators by sharing our content. Some of my content goes global. I write a blog post and within a couple of hours, maybe 24 hours, it's been read by 1,000 people. And within a month, it's been read by 10,000 people. I'm getting regularly average of 150,000 views a month on my blog now, which is very humbling for me, because all I did it for originally was to share my ideas with a few friends. And suddenly, everyone's come to the party. So it's exponential. Personal learning, there's me in the middle. Always looking the wrong way. But I think we've got to cater for individual needs, individual purposes. Howard Gardner says something profound. He said, look, let's forget about intelligent quotients, because that's measuring just a very, very narrow human capability, visual, spatial, and mathematical abilities. Let's go farther than that. Let's look at all the possible intelligences. And that, to me, is probably one of the best models of looking at individual differences for learning. And from that, we can model all sorts of things. So let's think about how we all learn in social contexts in a personal way. It can't be done, say people. Actually, it can. You saw from Derek this morning with his clickers that you can learn personally. It's all about the personal device. Look at this family in the 1950s here. They're all watching the same program, because there was probably only 1 or 2 channels to watch anyway. And as soon as it finishes, they all have to go to bed because they've forgotten how to talk to each other. They had the same experience. And We Are Family, if you now progress that to 2013, it becomes We Are Family. You see? Because now, although they're the same family, same type of people, looking at the same type of screen, gathered around it like a little tribe, they now have, each of them, a personal device in their hand. And that's what makes the difference, folks. Especially if they know how to use it. If they're literate, that's what makes the difference. Personal learning environments are more than just the web tools. They're about the environment, they're about the network that you create, and so on. And the personal learning network itself, I think, is going to be quite important, because it's really where we store our knowledge now. This is going to be one of our new learning futures. It's not so much what you know anymore, it's where you need to go to find it that you need to know. And that increasingly is going to be the issue as we develop and generate much more knowledge and content every day. It's about distributed learning. Games-based learning is going to be important and gamification is, as well, which isn't the same thing, but these are important because they teach us all sorts of transferable skills. Our students are going to be continually assessed, obviously, by themselves and their peers, but they're also working collaboratively. And I'll tell you another thing about this that's important, is that we learn how to fail and then succeed from our failures. Because we can reiterate, and we can go back and shoot them up again, or try and solve the problem in a different way. And we formulate new plans and new theses as we work through games, and that teaches us how to succeed through failure, which is, again, part of everyday life. What do we need to consider? I'm going to finish in a moment. I don't know how much time I've got left. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. Okay, we'll finish. Some of my learners taking notes. That's how they take notes now. Yeah? Interesting. Do we have all of these? I don't agree with any of these statements here, because I don't think that we can put people into age groups and say, oh, this is this group. The digital natives are going to be this way. Actually, no. Look at the statistics. Look at the research before you start looking at the anecdotes. And you'll see that most people in that age group are actually basic users. So let's not assume that young people know how to use technology. Let's not assume that older people don't, because it's unevenly distributed. There are people of both types in each group. So let's not make assumptions between these people. I think digital residents or natives, or visitors is a better word than natives. Those who can, they habituate themselves within the technology, and therefore they use it and they know how to use it more. And if they're visitors, if they're casual visitors, then they're not going to use it as well. And I think it's about context, not about age group. And my father, who's 84 years old, he got onto Facebook a couple of years ago, and he lolled. You know what I mean? He lolled. And my granddaughter, you know, she was outraged by him lolling. There is an age differential. You know, he lolled in the wrong way. Because he said, he announced very sadly that his sister, our Auntie Edith, had died. LOL. And my daughter, oh, you can't say that, Granddad. And he said, why not? She said, it means laughing out loud. He said, I didn't mean it. He said, I meant lots of love. You know, so you've got to be careful with these differentials between the cultural understanding of how we use technology, but let's not partition things into age groups. Let's think about things in context. All of these learners do several things and use it in several ways, but I think we need to show them that managing their online identity is important. They need digital wisdom. Another thing that they need is this kind of idea. You can see this picture here, can't you? I show my young students this. And most of them don't know what I'm talking about. If I show them that, oh, it's a 60s reggae band. Yeah. Actually, no, it's actually Lee Harvey Oswald getting assassinated by Jack Ruby, like 3 days after JFK was murdered by him. And Photoshop covers a multitude of ills. I mean, the thing is, I show them this picture, I say, what's wrong with it? And they go, ooh, what's wrong with this? Ooh. Is it 70%? No. Ah, that's not Thomas Edison. Oh, yes, it is. And eventually they get what I've done. The idea that they need digital literacy. They need to be able to interpret truth from fact. They need to be able to discern that not everything on the internet is actually factual. And they need these literacies. The idea is that, you know, it's not just skills, it's literacy. This guy's driving on the left side of the road here, on the left side of the car, on the right side of the road. In England, I learned to drive a car the other way round. When I went to America to drive, I had to relearn the culture. Do you see what I mean? My skills were not enough. We are putting people into alien environments when we put them into digital environments. And what we do there is we expect them to learn in the same way as they learn in traditional environments. It doesn't happen that way. We need a whole new set of literacies, I think, to be able to do things more effectively. So here's some of my ideas about transliteracy and so on. There's lots of other literacies. I mentioned that earlier on. These are not exhaustive. There's a whole list of things I think that all of us need to learn, and our students included, to actually allow us to be more successful learning through digital technologies. And just one final thought here from Socrates. Sorry, I see what's happened. I asked my son to find me a picture of Socrates. Yes, it's embarrassing. It's the wrong Socrates. That's the footballer, the Brazilian. Sorry, he's a football fan. And anyway, I'll change this. It's not Socrates that said it, it's Plato. So I'll have to find a picture of Plato. Here we go. Oh, heck, that's Socrates. Hang on. I'll do it in a minute. Here, now we've got it. There's Plato. Now it's correct. What you've just seen is the survival of the fittest content, or Darwinianism. It happens all the time on the web. It's about reiteration. It's about editing, polishing, deleting, revising. This is the fluid web that we're talking about. This is where we're going. This is our future. I'll leave you with John Gardner's wonderful quote. All too often, we're giving young people cut flowers when we should be teaching them to grow their own plants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.